Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Performance and Finance Scrutiny Committee meeting on the 9th, 9th of November 2022. And we shall start with Catherine, apologies for absence.
We've had apologies from Councillor Chapman, Councillor Noble, Councillor Deach. Councillor Whitcroft is joining us online, and we've got Councillor Tapper substituting for Councillor Noble and Councillor Gordon substituting for Councillor Deach.
Thank you very much. Minutes of the previous meeting. Any comments, observations, changes? Anyone to propose it? If there are none. Councillor White. And someone to second it, please. Councillor Black. Thank you. Agenda item 3, declaration of interest. Any declarations of interest on the items we are about to discuss? I don't see any, so none. We shall now get into the agenda, proper agenda. Half-year performance report. I believe it is, it's Officer...
Sarah Baines is online, but is presenting.
Sorry, who's doing that today?
So, Chair, it's myself, but I'm ably assisted by Ms. Bainbridge, who is joining us online.
Okay. Thank you very much. Over to you.
Members, this is the half-year monitoring report for the Council's annual plan. You'll know that last year the Council developed a 5-year strategy, and as part of the implementation of that 5-year strategy, have agreed each year to an annual plan. This is the update on the progress that's been made over the past year. The vast majority of the actions have either been delivered or on track to be delivered. A sizable but not particularly large proportion have experienced some delay, but most of the ones that have experienced delay, mitigating action is being taken to bring them back on track. And a very small number of items in the annual plan are at risk of not being delivered, mainly through circumstances outside the Council's control. So often either related to some of the higher levels of turnover we've had in the past 6 months, or reliance on third parties, like the County Council or other organisations that aren't as ready as we hope they would be to implement their part. But very happy, Chair, to take any questions.
Okay, but it's a very chunky report. I hope all of you have had the time to read it. So I shall now open it to the floor for questions and comments. Anyone? Wow. It looks like you're about to get away with it. No,
Chair, I don't like the idea of getting away with it.
No,
but
let me actually ask a few questions.
Okay.
My apologies. I see that your green, amber, and red system seems to work. I have highlighted a few. I'm sure there are other things that Councillor Galford may want to touch as well. It's not in my sort of portfolio to deal with. Let me go to those pages. It's on page 45. It's to do with housing and homeless. I mean, what my concern here is that we say we aim to build 49 homes in the target project column. Milestone is actually March 23. So that's something like 6 months from now or less. Yeah. ongoing dialogue with Accent, and what disappoints me is that the fact that you have, or not you, the council has looked at only one site. So this 49, I might assume it's a non-achievable target, which means it has an impact. I must also link into another thing. It has an impact on the local plan as well. I don't know how much it links to the local plan, but I presume there is one. If you can answer that first for me, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. So the delivery of housing in the borough comes from a variety of different sources. A lot of it comes from landowners and developers, and that's picked up within the 5-year housing land supply in terms of sites that we're aware of that are potentially coming forward, but also through the housing delivery test, which is a way of assessing the level of delivery that actually is occurring on the ground. This 49 isn't included in any of those, so this would be in addition to it. And in relation to the conversations with Accent Housing, the intention was that we would explore sites where we may have a land interest that may combine with a site that they would be interested in bringing forward for development. So we could help with the viability by assisting with the contribution of our land. And so the council has met with Accent Housing a number of times over the past year, has cooperated with discussions around looking at what you might traditionally call ransom strips to enable a development to be maybe larger and more viable than it might have been. But to date, none of those have come forward. And it's an example, I think, where on some occasions the council's delivery is down to its own means. You know, the council's in complete control. But because this relates particularly to joint ventures, we are reliant on the other party. So I guess all we can do is just make sure those conversations are ongoing, that we meet on a regular basis, that we prompt them on those sites. We identify new sites, but I think you're right to highlight this. This one is definitely at risk for this year.
I mean, do you still want to keep it on this sort of target list for 2023, or at this for the next report, would you like to move it on, take this off this list completely? Because you have to be realistic now. You're not going to achieve the 49. So let's be realistic about it. If we put something on a target, I would strongly suggest we try and aim to get it. My view is that we are not going to do it. That's a view I have. I could be wrong. You could happily disprove me before next March.
That's quite a challenge. You're being very kind, but there are always going to be, a handful of things in a plan that, for reasons outside the council control, doesn't get delivered. I think it would be more transparent and fairer to keep this on the list and to make sure that if we get to the end of the year and it's a red because it hasn't been delivered, that we take that on the chin and we find a way of making sure that we tackle it more effectively in the future. So I would propose we keep it on the list, even if the delivery is really difficult.
Okay, Councillor Tapper.
Thank you, Chair. Whenever we're talking about this particular subject, it always seems to be Accent Housing. Do we not discuss with any others, like, for instance, Vivid Homes? Have we brought this particular subject, for instance, before any other social housing provision providers? Thank you.
Chair, and thank you, Councillor Tapper. Yes, we, through Mr. Stevens and myself and other council officers, we meet with other housing associations as well, usually at a chief exec or director level, and we express a desire to work with them around particularly some of the smaller sites. So that might be some infill, it might be extensions of existing developments, or refurbishing and extending some schemes that may be coming to the end of their life. So we have those conversations, but even though we're having those, no specific schemes have come forward yet. Thanks, Chairman.
Thank you for that. Could I recommend that you actually add this to the note so that at least we know there's one more other than Accent we are dealing with. Thank you for that. If there are no other questions, oh, sorry, Councillor Allaway.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, this is a question about HQL05. I think it's on page 40. It's creating active environments for local residents by supporting at least 2 Surrey Heath schools to sign up to school travel plans. I know that Holy Trinity has signed up for that because they've got issues with safe access to schools for some of the residents in a safe method. And I see that's in the right-hand column, partnered with Surrey County Council to promote Surrey healthy schools. But inevitably, the problem will relate to highways improvements issues and safety for bike riders, if it's kids we're looking at, or parents and buggies walking to school. Is there any intention to engage with highways to improve this and make this facilitate the healthy option of walking to school, reduce car use, and making the residents feel safe? Thank you.
Chairman?
Yes, please.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Thank you. And
sorry,
thank you,
Chief
Councillor. Thank you,
Don't
Councillor Alleyway.
wait for me. You can answer.
Thank you, Chair. So, highways, road safety is the responsibility of Surrey County Council. And one of the things that's been really positive, I think, over the past 12 months is they have come forward with a different approach to transport. I think when I first joined, worked in Surrey within some other boroughs and districts, the motor car was absolutely dominant. It was always the thing that they focused on first: make the roads bigger, make the roads, the traffic travel quicker, remove all obstacles. That has now been turned on its head. They see the motor car as the lowest priority transport arrangement, with the highest priority being what they call active travel: walking, cycling, public transport. And so it is an explicit priority for the county. And I'm hoping that over the coming months and the next few years, we see more tangible evidence that that approach is being adopted. So yes, it is something that they certainly are talking about, and their policies and strategies do seem to reflect.
Yes, thank you. I attended Association of Local Councils meeting with the Highways portfolio holder, an American lady, I think, I can't remember her name. But yeah, it was all provision for travel, walking, cycling, safety, cars at the bottom of the list. But within 6 weeks ago, we had Highways' refusal to improve highway safety for children, significant amount of children walking to school from the new developments that have paid substantial seal money. So perhaps we could look at it at that angle, and we're quite happy to share the findings of the county's highways engineers report and why they're not going to do anything.
Thank you.
Go on, please.
Yeah, no, thank you. I'd be very happy to have a look at that.
Could I make a small recommendation on this? Because this is beyond our control in terms of highways. So would you take time to write to county highlighting this issue in particular? At least we have a councillor has taken the time to bring it up to you today. I think we should do that, and if you could do that, that'll be great. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. And I think Councillor Alleyway and I have spoken about that site previously, but I haven't seen their latest response. And so if there's anything that I can do to assist on a safety issue for young people, I'd be very happy to help.
Thank you. Councillor Wheeler.
Thank you. I feel like a broken record. I'm pleased to see that Frimley CCG has been invited to Places Leisure to help with social prescribing. 2 points on that. Where is North West Surrey Health Services, which is the area that impacts predominantly my residents? And the other one is that I thought that Frimley CCG ceased to exist in July of 2022. So I'm surprised to see it referenced in the document. I am very pleased to see that later on in the document there has been engagement with North West Surrey, so thank you for that. And then the other one relates to safeguarding training for our own staff and our movement as a council towards that. And I just wondered why, and it may have been, in which case I apologise profusely for having missed it, but I just wondered why, particularly given that it's online e-learning, that hasn't been extended to counsellors, because I think it's something that might be quite helpful within our roles. You know, a lot of us are out in the community an awful lot of the time, so it was just a request, unless there is a huge cost associated with it, which I'm assuming if it's online learning there isn't, why that potentially couldn't be extended to counsellors even during this term.
That's
Please,
okay.
yes.
Thank you for the question. I suspect the terminology for the Frimley ICS was probably out of date because this document was originally written, I think it was drafted in November 21. And so what we're dealing with is a legacy document from that time. So that might be the reason, but yes, the name has changed. In relation to safeguarding, so I agree, safeguarding is clearly important to council officers in delivering their work, but it's also a really important consideration for members. It's something that the monitoring officer and democratic services and I are discussing as part of the induction for the new intake of members in May 23. The issue about the online training is that it has, the online training that we use is a little bit clunky, not particularly user-friendly. And I think we should look at it, but it doesn't sound as smooth running as you might expect. We access online training through something called Surrey Learn, so it's developed across Surrey. So it's not something that we develop. But I know from experience and for those officers that use it that it isn't always clear that you've done all the modules and you've completed everything. So I'm hoping that as these things get refined, they become a little bit more straightforward. But certainly we can look at it as part of the rollout of induction training for members in 6 months' time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Not really a question. Just to say it's very heartening to see all the green marking on all the green and environmental projects that we're undertaking. And I'd like to say thank you to our officers here, Mr. Stevens and his team in particular. I do have one question about air monitoring though. I know we get a very thorough report every year, but I'm just wondering when we may be able to monitor the air in other parts of the borough. Some are crying out for that to happen. Thank you.
Mr. Stevens.
Thank you, Leader. Thank you, Councillor Galliford. We were anticipating a change in legislation in relation to the requirements for us to monitor. They haven't been forthcoming. So we wait with bated breath to see what that will bring. But clearly there's a change in requirements, or an anticipated change in requirements for us to monitor PM 2.5, so finer particulates. We don't know what form or detail that legislation will take yet. So we're waiting with bated breath, and clearly we will respond and monitor as we're expected to do so. In the meantime, unfortunately, there is a cost associated with the air quality monitoring we undertake. We undertake passive air quality monitoring across the borough in a multitude of sites. I believe it's 50 off the top of my head. And that is as far as we can possibly go within the resources that we currently have. We obviously have live air quality monitoring as well in one location, and again that comes at a substantial cost. So as it currently stands, until there is a change in legislation which helps to us to understand the implications moving forward, that really is as much as we can commit to. What I would say is that the annual air quality plan will come forward to executive at the start of next year. And if there is a need, as a consequence of that monitoring, for us to move some of those passive monitoring stations around the borough, then we certainly will do so.
Yeah, I just want to add something. I mean, you say cost. I mean, surely we have incurred a similar cost before, and it's somewhere in our budget or somewhere in our expenditure. Why is that we haven't budgeted it into this year so that we can continue to monitor it rather than let it slip and wait for another year, then we may have moved, the targets may have moved. I don't know. You explain that to me.
Thank you, Chair. The monitoring is ongoing. It doesn't stop. It continues throughout the year, and that is budgeted. But clearly what we have is we have a cost implication for the diffusion tubes themselves, to have them analysed, and then to effectively rationalise that data and produce our annual air quality report. On top of that, there's also the running costs for the live monitoring as well, and the officer time to actually collect and replace those diffusion tubes. So any change to that, any substantial change, brings a cost in terms of equipment and also in terms of officer time.
I accept what you say. There is cost, but my point is that we've incurred similar costs before. So why didn't we impute that into this year's budget? So we can't blame the cost on this particular one. It's all about monitoring air quality and green issues related to Councillor Galliford's passion.
We are continuing to monitor. The cost is already incurred throughout the year, and it is within the budget. Any change, clearly we'll have to look at the budget implications for that.
Thank you. Councillor Black.
Yeah, Mr. Steve, just clarify, what you're saying is more testing means more costs.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, that's correct, Councillor Black.
Chair, please.
Sorry. My apologies. I know this particular one, I know our revenue benefit team do a fantastic job. What concerns me, I mean, this has been in the news before, it's a number of days the housing benefits get to be the processing of a housing benefit. I mean, it's actually looking pinkish on our sheet. So I don't know what we can do. I have read the rationale and the reason, and I do understand some of it. Is it something we can overcome to actually bring it within the set targets, is my question. I don't know who wants to answer that. Mr. Watson?
Thank you. Is that working now? Yes, we do try and improve our performance on the housing benefits. It's a fine line. I reminded the quote about an infinite number of typewriters and doing the works of Shakespeare. What we have to try and balance is the number of members of the team we have and the ability to process the claims, some of which are very complicated, as it says here, around the exempt items. We monitor it, plus the fact the team has been very busy over the last, since the start of this financial year, processing the payments for energy fuel rebates. That's the same team that does the housing benefits, and also that team does the Homes for Ukraine payments to the host families. So we process as fast as we can, but without extra resource, it does become more difficult. And I wouldn't advocate bringing in extra resource to do it, but what we can do is have a concerted effort to try and bring that turnaround time down. But it's not an excuse, but it's similar across the rest of the country in that the demand on revenues and benefits teams has increased multiply with the extra work they do around becoming the payments agency for many government's departments. And that's where we get to. So we're concerned of it. We're not at the point where we would see a DWP intervention at this time, though.
Thank you very much for that, Mr. Watson. Councillor Galliford.
Just on the point of benefits, this is a comment because I was supporting someone applying for a discount on their council tax, and both of them happen to have autism, which was pointed out quite clearly in the email that they sent and the email that I sent. And the response was, well, they just have to reapply, basically, with no indication of how to do that, etc. So you know, it's all worked out fine, thankfully, but it's just a point to note that everyone in the team is aware that some people have hidden disabilities, etc., and perhaps to be a bit more careful about reading the information they give and supporting people a little more closely. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Councillor Gordon.
Just for the record, I had a similar case to Councillor Galliford, supporting residents with learning needs for given benefits, and the team were amazing, absolutely phenomenal, couldn't praise them enough at all. They got the team on straight away, they're fully supportive, so my experience was different to yours, and they were absolutely amazing, so thank you all concerned, they were brilliant.
Thank you for that, Councillor Gordon. Sorry, as there are no other questions, I shall move on to agenda item 5. I'm on the right agenda, isn't it? Yeah. Public litter bins. I presume it's, I see that Councillor Dugan is not here and Councillor Rebecca Jennings-Jones, both of them have given their apologies. I presume it's Mr. Stevens who is going to be performing today.
Thank you, Chair. I know that members of PNF have been waiting for this one with great excitement. This is on the request of Councillor Deach due to concerns around the collection or lack of collection from our public litter bins across the borough. First, I'd like to thank the officers for assisting in the preparation of this report, but to summarise, there are 836 litter bins across the borough, and those are largely split between what we would classify as parks bins and street bins. So the park bins fall under the portfolio of Councillor Jennings-Evans, so that's leisure, culture and community, and the remaining 481 under the or the oversight of Councillor Dugan under the environment and health portfolio. There are obviously other bins within the borough, and that's set out in the report, and they are managed by a variety of different organisations. And we're currently in the process of mapping those, so we have a very clear picture of the ownership of all the bins in the borough. The report sets out the contractual arrangements that we have with our two primary contractors, so that's Glendale and Amy, and Annex 2 provides some information around the performance of one of our contractors in particular. We also set out in the report the improvements that we're seeking to make over the coming months, and the two critical ones are the bin replacement programme. Some of that is in relation to replacing our dog bins with more general litter bins, and the rationale behind that is that the dog bins are reasonably small, and actually the waste from those containers goes into the same disposal process as our general litter does. So actually there's no tangible reason anymore to have distinct bins for dog waste. So we are looking to undertake a bin replacement programme. We are looking to fund that moving forward from community infrastructure levy, if at all possible. And the other thing that we're looking to do is to undertake a full mapping exercise of the bins. And the purpose of that is to make sure that we can improve the ease of reporting for residents, just to make it simpler. So you can effectively click on a map. That will give you the owner or the responsible organisation for the bin, and then it will retake you to the reporting mechanism for that particular organisation. So it makes it far simpler and far more streamlined. We can demonstrate a fairly rudimentary version of the mapping if you'd like, but other than that, I'm quite happy to take any questions.
Let me start with Councillor Hawkins.
Thank you, Chairman. It was almost synchronised there, I think. Occasionally we get requests from residents to add a new bin, usually on routes that are well used by school children. Do we have tuck shops in school? It's showing my age here. We often get that request. How can we deal with that? Can more bins be added? And I'm not sure if anybody else has got a similar question, but I'm happy to hold that back to do the run down the line. Thank you.
Can you go do the run down the line? Councillor Wheeler, please.
Thank you. Mine relates to SANGs, bins on SANGs. I can't see them anywhere within this group. I appreciate you're in the process of mapping, but we have quite a number of SANGs areas, and certainly from a personal point of view, it's those bins that fill my inbox.
Okay, I know I shall, Councillor Rice.
Thank you. My question relates to the replacement of dog poo bins with general bins. Obviously, I completely understand and completely agree. And I'm just wondering, will there be any communications to inform residents that to essentially encourage them to use those bins? Because otherwise they may think, well, they've removed the dog poo bin, I've now got to take it somewhere else. So it's just to ensure that residents are fully aware that, yes, put your dog poo in the general waste bin.
Thank you, Chair. On the question of SANGs, just to answer that particular question by Councillor Wheeler, generally I believe that the SANGs are managed...
I'd rather if the office answered that question.
Yeah. Okay, fair enough. Well, first question is 1.3, paragraph 1.3, 481 bins are considered as street litter bins managed by Amy. Does this include dog poo bins, which are street-based? Because whenever I've asked this question before, I've always been told that dog poo bins, wherever they are, whether they're on streets or whether they're on our green spaces and recreation grounds, are the responsibility of Glendale. But this report doesn't seem to imply that. It seems to imply that dog poo bins in the street are the responsibility of joint waste services. Can we have a clarification on that one, please? Thank you.
Okay, sorry. Let me also go to the last questioner, Councillor White.
I'm sorry, mine's not a question, it's a thank you, because over the last few weeks I've had to ring up on many occasions to get overflow bins emptied, and I have to say they've been done the same day, if not the next morning. So I'd just like to say thank you for the residents of Bagshot and North Windlesham.
Mr. Stevens, you've got 4 questions.
Thank you. I think Councillor Deitch's request to put this on the agenda was driven by a number of incidents of dog bins in particular not being emptied and overflowing. So my question is really about, it's good to see all the measures and the metrics and the penalties, but what's the root cause of that recent problem and what's been done about it?
I'm going to let Mr. Stevens answer all of them one at a time, please.
Okay, so the first question was Councillor Hawkins, can bins be added? Yes, they can, but that comes at a cost. And obviously some of the costs are set out in the report. So our preference is to actually understand what other bins are in the location, whether the emptying of those bins is sufficient enough so they're not overflowing or full. And you'll see the indicators that we have or the requirements within the contracts for those bins. If there is a need for a bin, clearly we will look at that, and I would suggest that you send any requests to myself and I'll share them with the relevant officer or organisation. But please understand that any new bins applies a cost to the contract. The second one, Councillor Wheeler, SANGs areas. As I understand it from the officers, the bins that we are responsible for within the SANGs areas we already have mapped. If there are other locations, rural locations, where there are bins that are under other people's ownership, we are in the process of mapping those. In relation to Councillor Rise, dog poo bin placement, yes, one thing I omitted to say, another element that we're looking at as part of the reporting process is putting QR codes onto our bins. And along with that will be wording, which will clearly support, you can use this bin for anything as an approach. The QR codes will be unique, so actually when we start to enhance the mapping system, just taking a photograph and tapping on the link for that QR code will actually populate the forms or send you to the right location for that particular bin. Councillor Tapper, 481 bins, does that include dog poo bins? Our understanding is that it doesn't. We don't believe that there are any dog poo bins under the oversight of Amy. They are under the oversight of Glendale. Now, if I'm wrong with that, I profusely apologise and will provide clarification to this committee. Councillor White, thank you. That's very kind of you to say. We do our best. There are obviously performance indicators in terms of the response times for dealing with overflowing bins, and I'm pleased that they're working, so thank you very much for that. Councillor Black, yes, the issues behind Glendale predominantly was down to changes in staff. A key member of staff within Glendale who was responsible for the emptying of the park bins left. And unfortunately, they took with them quite a substantial amount of knowledge and understanding. So there were bins that weren't perhaps on the mapping system or had been moved around, either by Glendale or by the public, because some of these bins are obviously movable. So that element of knowledge wasn't held by Glendale. I think it's fair to say as well that the frequency that the bins are meant to be emptied, that is set out within Glendale's own system, wasn't necessarily the frequency that this particular operative was emptying them under. So if a bin, for example, was meant to be emptied once a week, this particular operative might be emptying them 3 times a week because they were visibly full, but that wasn't then being reported back through the organisation. So when there's been this change in staff, there's been a lag and unfortunately a lack of knowledge, and it's taken time for Glendale to gain momentum and correct that. So I'm hoping what you will now see is a substantial improvement over the issues that we had 6 to 4 weeks ago.
Thank you very much for that, Mr. Stevens. Councillor Tapper.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I do have a couple of other questions. Referring to paragraph 325, replenishment of dog poo bags at the Tix-Pax stations located around the borough. I think you need to look at these fairly closely because the local yobs find it quite amusing to set fire to the bags which are hanging out of the slot. And that means that the information which is on the stations themselves, particularly the QR code, which you're supposed to be able to use to report when a station is empty, get damaged and are unusable. You can't read the QR code. And to be quite honest, even those that you can, I think, are actually out of date. They need to be checked to make sure that they do actually point to a valid web address. If you could look into that for me, please, that's great. Inspecting litter bins, that's 327. Inspecting litter bins for structural damage, undertaking repairs or removing those beyond repair. There's been one on Heatherside Recreation Ground, which was ripped off of its concrete base a year ago, and I reported it a year ago. And it's done its rounds. It seems to pop up in various different places, sometimes in the middle of the football pitch. At the moment, it's lying on its side, or was this morning, lying on its side beside the bench, beside the football pitch on the main field. All it really needs is someone to glue it back onto the concrete base so that it can't be removed. It goes on its travels because it can. There's nothing to weigh it down, and it's easy to do. Why has it taken a year to do something about this? Still hasn't been completed. And lastly, 4.1, I'm delighted to hear that there will be a new way of reporting issues, particularly with dog poo bins, because there is no mechanism on the SHBC website at the present moment to report problems with dog poo bins. Literally, there is none. You can report it on the JWS website because there is a section there for dog poo bins, but the big problem is that you have to give an address, and there is literally no address for a recreation ground. If you put in Heatherside Recreation Ground, it comes back and says no such place. So there is no way you can actually report things at the moment. So the sooner we see this brought into action, the better. Perhaps you can give us some idea when we might be able to actually see a working system that end users, residents...
Thank you, Councillor Tapper. Mr. Stevens.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Tapper. Yes, I'll duly noted in relation to the fire risk of Tix-Pax, and we will check the details are up to date on those, and if they aren't, clearly we'll rectify that. In relation to the Heatherside Recreation Ground stray bin, I didn't appreciate that we had a bin that was straying, and I have to accept I don't think our officers did either, so we will look into that one as well. The reporting of dog poo bins, it is there, but I have to confess it's quite a convoluted mechanism. It's under Report a Parks problem. So any of the bins within our parks and open spaces, that's where it can be found. So yes, as well as the mapping, we're looking at simplifying the wording as well on the website.
Thank you very much. Let me also thank Mr. Stevens and his officers. Every time I have reported on the dog droppings, it's being cleared up very fast. Thank you. But having said this, I mean, Mr. Stevens and I had a conversation prior to the meeting on this particular topic, and you suggest there are about 5 people collecting the litter for us, and the mapping system is going to identify it. I suggested to you at the time, I want it recorded, I would strongly suggest the council actually speaks to 1 or 2 of them to consolidate it. So you, as officers, have only 1 or 2 companies to deal with, not 5, where that makes it a lot easier for you, and it'll be a lot of cost. It will be cost effective as well. Yep. Thank you.
I'm happy to come back on that if you'd like, Chair. Yes, so we have had conversations with Accent about some of the bins that they're responsible for. There are a small number of other bins across the borough as well, where we will engage with other organisations to increase that discussion. Sometimes there are issues in terms of accessibility, where they are on open spaces, so it's more difficult for our crews to get there to collect them. But yes, we will have those conversations.
Thank you very much. If there are no other questions on litter and the dog droppings, I'm going to move on to something very boring. Half-year budget monitoring update, which is agenda item 6. I presume that's Councillor Perry.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, members. I think the background to this report, which is an update on the revenue budget for 22-23, is that we're still fighting our way out of the big black hole that was caused by the pandemic. It's very easy to forget that we've had 2 years of real hard times, and because we're getting back almost to normality, that still has to be addressed. And as you know, the plan was to do that over a number of years. We've had to tackle this several ways, and we're also in an environment of raging inflation and increasing interest rates and what have you. We have, as you recall, had the Star Chamber process, and £647,500 of efficiencies, savings and additional income were identified as part of that. And they've been incorporated into the budgets for 2022-23. This revised forecast, which is detailed in the report, does reflect some of the impact of inflation and increases in interest, but the current estimate, as at the end of September, is for an overspend of about £300,000 for the year. And as you're aware, since that date, an increase of staff salaries has been agreed, and that's effective from October 22. That will add approximately £450,000 to our revenue expenditure in this financial year. The original budget for the year end was to fund an estimated deficit of 2.5 million from our reserves. If we currently forecast an overspend of 300,000, as I said, but and we're trying to bring that back into line over the year, but if we don't, and we include the 450,000 to cover the staff salary increase, the expected drawdown from reserves this year is going to be 3.3 million. So this sort of background probably explains why there's a little bit more reticence than there was in the past to agree to additional expenditure. Everybody wants to spend more money, but at the same time we're trying to balance our books and stay solvent. The report details all the key numbers and the explanations of all major variances, but we'll be happy to answer any questions that do pop up that aren't answered in the report.
Any questions? Councillor Hawkins.
Thank you, Chairman. Firstly, it's a statement that I'm very pleased to see that there's an increase in the use of Knoll Road multi-storey car park with some quite a substantial increase in income there, and that is good news because it can only mean more people. I read that as more people coming into the town, the greater spend, greater footfall, which will give retailers greater confidence, and that has got to be good news all the way around. The other side of the coin is that there's, on the, just below the good news, there's a bit of bad news in that we've had to use agency within accountancy to cover vacant posts, etc., due to difficulty replacing. I don't know if that is historic or if that has now been resolved, but at an earlier meeting I did say that I was aware that Surrey County Council had offered their services to assist, recognising there is a shortage of good quality accountants. I don't know if there is such a thing as a bad accountant, but I won't go there at the moment. We'll park that one. And I know that the county are quite keen. I mean, in fact, I think they've gone into Woking to help them for a different reason. And I asked if that situation is still there, that there is a shortage, and should we be speaking with the county to see if we can get their assistance? Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Perry.
That issue is dealt in the portfolio report, which comes later, but I don't know if Bob wants to say anything at this point on that.
Thank you very much, Councillor Perry, Chair, Councillor Hawkins. We still are running with a significant number of agency staff within accountancy. It is a situation that I don't relish, but I relish less than that, the principle of not having any accountants at all. As you're aware, finance is probably the lifeblood of any local authority, and to have a gap in that finance team does create problems. I can't speak for the services, but I do know they are appreciating the fact that we have providing these finance business partners to their areas to help them out, and that's shown through, I believe, the quality of some of the monitoring reports we're getting through and the better financial management. Regarding the county, I wasn't aware of the offer. It's certainly not come to me through Surrey Treasurers when they're offering there. I understand that Woking, is it Woking, you say they've got people coming in, are in a particular situation where there is a possible intervention, and I don't want to say there is going to be, but certainly the government are looking at Woking in more detail, and that might be why county are providing extra resource into that area. The issue, of course, is they will be coming in as the same as our agency staff with no real knowledge of the service and the and Surrey Heath as a borough in general, and it's probably better, in my view, that we get agency staff who have the experience of district council rather than someone who's worked in a county and doesn't understand some of the intricacies the district councils have. Obviously, if there was a unitary accountant out there who's got experience of everything, it would be mostly useful, and that's where we are. It is actually in the constitution of the council.
I'm not going to let you ask for a period. I put out advertisement out here, Bob. Sorry, Mr. Watson.
That's okay.
Councillor Black.
Thank you. The only thing I didn't understand on the variances was the increased drawdown on the pension holding account, 123k. Could you just explain what that is, please?
I couldn't understand that, sorry.
Sorry, do you want me to repeat that, Councillor Black? I mean, Councillor Black wants to know, there's an increase, it was on my list as well, increase in drawdown on the pension holding account of £123,000. How did that come about?
Yes, certainly. Thank you, Councillor Black, Chair. It is a fund that we hold as an account to pay off the pension deficits, which gets assessed. Now, again, trying to assess the pension when you set the budget is very difficult when you haven't got the actuarial report that's come in saying like that. This year we were late getting the information from the county, so obviously their accounting services aren't that great. And because of that, when we did get it in, we had to do an increased drawdown over the amount budgeted in our pension fund. But we do have the capacity to deal with that, and it's just saying it's in there and reported as a variance.
For those who don't know this, most likely Councillor Black is a relatively new councillor. Correct me if I'm wrong, but the pensions are managed generally by the county, am I right?
Yes, the county run the Surrey County Pension Fund. They get an external actuarial review that comes on a triennial basis every 3 years. And we're actually at the point of the third year of it, but it does adjust each year. And this time we were late getting the information, so we couldn't put it in at budget setting time. So therefore we've had to make the adjustment in year. But it is affordable, we can cover it. Just be great if we get the information earlier.
Thank you so much for that, Mr. Watson. Councillor Gordon.
Going back to the accountancy shortfall staff, how many staff are we short? Because there's not been a lot of communication looking for staff on social media. So all the general three advertising hasn't shown a need for accountants. So maybe it's worth communicating internally and try and find our own.
Where we can, we will also try and bring staff on. Where possible, we will convert fixed-term contract or agency staff into permanent if we can, provided the cost isn't too prohibitive, because obviously agencies will claim a finder's fee, but if we look at that around the whole thing. We have been out to advert on many occasions. We sometimes get applications that are plentiful, but the quality coming through, unfortunately, doesn't seem to be at the right level that we're looking for. And tied in with that, of course, is the accountancy staff tend to be a bit more fluid in their mobility, and they will leave quite happily. And that's the trouble, because we now work from home a lot more, and other councils do the same thing. We're competing with the likes of the London boroughs. That actually means you can go and work in London for London money, but not actually work in London. And that becomes a great real pressure on our situation there. And it's a vicious circle that as the demand for agency staff goes up, the price of agency staff goes up, more people want to go and work on the agency. What we will hopefully see is that as budgets tighten with the cost of living crisis and the pressure on all councils' budgets, they will stop using agencies and start pushing people back into a permanent employment situation. And we're obviously actively trying to recruit people, but there's an element of quality that's coming through right now.
Thank you for that, Mr. Watson. Any other question? If not, sorry. Councillor Perry.
Thank you. I'd just like to add a bit more to that, really. We have been suffering from a degree of churn amongst staff who have been moving around for higher salaries. Hopefully the pay increase that's just been agreed will help slow that down, at least from where we are now. So hopefully the future will be more stable than it has been. It's been a bit of a nightmare for Mr. Watson and the team to keep it going. I think they've done a fantastic job to hold it the way they have. Certainly I've seen a great improvement in the comprehensive nature of the activity and the sorting out of lots of stuff that's been left undone in the past, I must say. It's now in a much more efficient state.
Thank you for that, Councillor Perry. I couldn't agree with Councillor Perry more. I mean, Mr. Watson has, I like to think, cleaned up that section and seems to be running relatively normally now compared to 2 years prior to that, or 2.5 years prior to that. Well done to you and to your team. But I have a question which is potentially before your time, Mr. Watson, or Mr. Perry may not be able to answer, so I will address it to Mr. Perry, but maybe both of you cannot answer this. It's to do with our deal with Runnymede Borough Council on the community services. I see that there has been a double count. The word double count has come into play. I mean, when the deal was done, I suspected, I had no evidence, just a suspect, that this deal is not exactly the perfect deal for either party. Now, we are carrying in our books £167,000, a double counting error. Is this cash loss or just an accounting error?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, it's not supposed to double count as a budget misunderstanding between us and Runnymede Council. I can't comment on whether the deal's good. Mr. Stevens may want to, but that's not for me to make that observation, and certainly was before my time. The accounting error is actually during my time, so I'll say there again, it's down there. And for the information around it, it is because Runnymede invoice us for our costs of providing the service to us. We also get a grant from the county council that we then passport over to Runnymede. Now, through the accounting budget setting time process when we went through, probably done with too much haste at the time, I would suggest, it was that Runnymede sent us the net position on the assumption that they would have already had that money passported over, which actually I think is the wrong way to account for things. You should...
Mr. Watson, I think you will lose half the crowd here or more. So if you can try and simplify it as best as you can in terms of whether it's a cash loss or book entry loss, I think that's more than sufficient.
It's in the budgets, it's under budgeted, therefore it will be something we have to pay that's not budgeted as opposed to a cash loss. And is purely because of misunderstanding of the treatment of the county grant by Runnymede and us.
Thank you, Mr. Watson. So it is a cash loss, fundamentally. Yes?
Yes,
it's a cash
we're
loss.
paying more than we budgeted for.
Thank you. Mr. Stevens, do you want to add something to this?
Yes, it's an anomaly within the budget, but we are working hard with our colleagues in Runnymede and our finance colleagues to make sure we claw back as much of that as possible without impacting on the service provision. In relation to the quality of the partnership, I would say it's very strong. And I would also say that moving forward, it will get better. There are greater efficiencies that can be made through the partnership working, and I hope you'll see that coming forward soon, Chair.
Thank you very much. Councillor Perry.
I just make the point that the borough has lost nothing on this transaction at all. We got the right money from county. It's just a mix-up on how it was being paid. So although we budgeted less than was done, we will not lose out at all on that. So it's, yeah, not a big issue, actually.
Thank you very much. I can assure 167,000 on a piece of paper which says double counting and a loss. It's a big issue for our council, with all due respect to you, Councillor Perry. And when you add up the 167, sorry, let me finish. When you add up the 167,000 to the 123,000, which Councillor Black and I was going to have highlighted, that's about 300,000 pounds. That's a lot of money. That's your 302,000 at the bottom. Of course, there are savings to mitigate some of it, but can you see where we are coming from? As a scrutiny committee, we are scrutinizing it and saying we have made two big, massive provisions that have not been there. If you made those provisions, we wouldn't be in this position in terms of not digging 7 million, we would have dug 7.5 million, and that would have been declared up front. I'm not blaming the finance officers at all, absolutely none, because it's way beyond their time. And 123 is not anyone's fault, because that's a county problem that we may have to take it on a chin at a later stage. But when you say it's not a problem, it is a problem for this council. It's 300,000 at the bottom line. Thank you very much. I'm not going to entertain any more discussion on this. Sorry, Mr. Watson, very short, please.
Yes, just to clarify, it's under budgeting. It's money that we would have had to pay, and we do have to pay to Runnymede, and therefore what we have is a budgeting under budget anomaly that's when we set the budgets.
Thank you so much. Any more questions on this? No, thank you. Agenda item 6B now, sorry, which is to do with capital budgets.
Me again, I'm afraid. This report covers the actual capital expenditure incurred to date this year and the forecast to the year end for the 22-23 financial period. As the report details, the expenditure Expenditure and commitments to date total 1.38 million, which represents approximately 13% of the 10.65 million originally forecast for the year. 8.22 million of this of the planned expenditure has been profiled into later years, and most of this is covered by the investment and development service area. This means that the revised forecast capital spend for this year will reduce to 2.4 million. Full details of the budgeted and actual numbers are in Annex 1.
Thank you, Councillor Perry. Any questions on the capital expenditure? Councillor Tapper.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I have a question on page 96, item 37 in the list here. Heatherside Park replacement. Replacement of what? I find it difficult to try and associate that with something that's actually been done in Heatherside Park, unless you're talking about Chelmsmoor Park. Is it the replacement of the benches there? And if so, why is it £15,000? That seems to be an extraordinary amount of money.
Slide number 37, £15,000 on page 96.
On page 96. Which query?
Stevens.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Tapper. If you can indulge me, I will get back to you on that. I believe it's play equipment, but I'll just verify.
Councillor Tapper again.
Yes, I can follow up that. If that's the case, then it's actually Bentley Copse that we're talking about here. It's not what we would consider the park. That makes sense if that is the case. May I ask one other question as well? One thing I noticed that is missing from here that maybe you can answer me whether or not it should be in here, is that our Wellingtonia Avenue, as you know, is a nationally famous avenue of redwood trees, some of which have had to be removed because of disease. I know intended replacements were acquired but died where they were being supposedly looked after before they could be planted out. And my understanding is that they had to be replaced at some point. I don't know whether that has been done. They certainly haven't been planted yet, although we're getting towards the area of time of the year when it should be. Should that be in here? And if so, should there be an amount shown? And if so, what is that amount? Thank you.
Mr. Stevens.
Thank you, Councillor Tapper. Again, I will come back to you with a response if that's okay. I'm not entirely conversant with exactly where the whips are that are meant to be replacing the ones on Wellingtonia Avenue.
Councillor White, sorry.
There's two updates I would like, which is item 1263A, the High Street Bagshot, and also one that I have discussed with you in the briefing, but we'll ask again, number 29, the Whitmore Road play area, and the update on that. If you could update Bagshot councillors where we are with that. You don't have to do that right now, but if in the near future we could have an update on both of those items.
Yep, thank you very much. Thanks for that, Mr. Stevens. Councillor Rice.
Thank you, Chair. It's just more of a question on the presentation of this. I'm just wondering if it would be possible in future reporting of this to include the ward relevant for each of the items. Obviously, there are some things that will be all wards or multiple wards. I know that we use it on various others, and I know that we do have identifiers, but it would just be useful in the future if that was possible. Thank you.
Very good idea. Thank you. Thank you for that. Before we move on, I just have to make something clear to everyone here. I was not getting shirty with Mr. Perry over that comment. I actually was, where I'm keen, if we make losses, I rather scrutinize it properly, and it need to be recorded. The officers do a fantastic job. I do not take that away from the officers who work with the CEO here. They really do a really fantastic job. And if not for them, this wouldn't be coming up. It would be lost somewhere in the system. I thank them for bringing it to the scrutiny committee for us to ask the right questions. Not, if it's got to be defended, I will defend it to the hilt on behalf of the council. But these are way beyond everyone's officers. I don't want to blame the officers for this at all, in any shape or form. I really do not. Okay. Moving on. Agenda item 7. Treasury outturn, please.
Just for a change. You got me again. So as at the 30th of September, the borough had outstanding borrowings of 167 million. 100 million of this was in long-term borrowings, and the balance is made up by a number of shorter-term loans that we've received from other local authorities. As reported at the recent Performance and Finance Scrutiny meeting, the switch of 50 million from short-term loan to long-term debt during the last year will increase the interest being paid by the borough significantly. Full details of all borrowings and investments are provided in the report.
Thank you. Any questions? None whatsoever. Very clearly, Councillor Wheeler.
Sorry, I just wondered if we did have any legal and governance issues. It just says insert text in the board papers.
You need to speak up a little, please. Thank you.
I'll bring this a little bit closer, I think, rather than trying to project any further. I said I just wondered if there were any legal and governance issues, given that on page 107 it just says insert text.
And the following on 9.
And also on 9 as well, monitoring officers' comments. So maybe we could have just a comment on those, please.
What are you querying? 7.5?
No, 107, 8 and 9. In my minutes, they just say insert text.
Oh, insert, yeah, monitoring officer, yeah.
Yes, sorry. Yes, thank you, Councillor Wheeler. There actually are two reports here. The first report is the outturn report from the end of last year that was presented to executive and has now come to this committee for its review. To say that's probably the wrong way round, and that's a polite way of saying things. And next time the outturn report will come here first to this committee and then on to executive. It is in there. The reason why there's no comments and should have been deleted from there is because this is a report that's monitoring what we've done historic, and therefore we have complied with our items there. But I'll make sure the next time the report comes, it is fully completed.
Thank you very much for that, Mr. Watson. If there are no other questions, I have a small question. I mean, this Mr. Watson knows this kind of, he and I have had a number of conversations on this. What kind of, I'm looking at these borrowings, Mr. Watson. Maybe it was during your time, I looked at the timeline on it. If you look at the borrowings on sheet number 114, if you look at the summary of council borrowings as at 30th of September 2022, one was Phoenix, the bottom one, the Phoenix loans, annuity. One was borrowed, start date was 21st of February, and second one, 22nd of February, February 2022. One was 2021, other was 2022. And look at the interest rates. I'm intrigued. I really am curious more than anything else. They seem to be higher at that point than a PWLB loan. Why would the advisors, not you, our advisors would advise us to go to Phoenix loans instead of PWLB. Would you know?
The simple answer is obviously we worked with the advisors, or the people who were here at the time worked with the advisors, and they were considered the length of the loan. I believe these loans, trying to find how long they are, they're 40-year loans on annuity. Depending which PWLB rate you look at, the annuity rate at PWB is normally higher than the rate that they publish for maturity, but obviously at the time worked with the advisors and the finance officers of the council would have decided that annuity was the best way to go around the loans. I think the rates that actually I've got there are fairly comparable for that length of loan with the PWB at that time when they were done as a forward deal. So I'm not sure there's a great deal of difference in there. I think at the time they were arranged was a time when the Treasury had actually boosted 100 basis points onto PWLB. So they may well have represented at that time a suitable deal. I can't imagine any finance officer would have not challenged at that time if PWB was cheaper, because we have freedom of access to it.
No, that's a very reason. I was curious as to why the rates are higher, and how any section 1 firm officer would have compared the rates.
I
I
certainly
think it's
wouldn't.
because they're annuities and rather than old maturity.
Yeah.
My apologies. Other question is actually on borrowing activity to 30th of September. Maybe Mr. Perry or Mr. Watson could give us a quick answer, not a long one, please, on this one. We got 167 as at 30th of September 22, and on 30th of September 21, we got 185. Have we been repaying loans?
Thank you. Yes, the nature of short-term borrowing is it's short-term, and when we matures, we pay it back. Sometimes we'll roll it over with the same entity. Other times we'll find another entity to replace it if we can't actually have the resource to pay it back. So short answer is they do finish, we repay them as they mature.
Thank you very much. Okay. Thank you very much. That's clear now. Thank you. Councillor Black.
Thank you, Chair. Can you just clarify, the PWLB loans, they are not fixed, are they? And what does the variability depend on, if I'm correct?
Watson, yeah, please.
Yes, Public Works Loan Board loans are fixed. You can get variable loans, but they're normally for the shorter-term duration loans. But anything of length here that we've got, be they maturity loans, be they annuities, or equal instalment of principal loans, are at a fixed rate, and that's why we lock them in long-term borrowing.
I know you and I have had this conversation, Mr. Bob Watson. I nearly called you Bob and stop there. My apologies, Mr. Watson. Maybe the committee members may want to know as to what your plans are with your short-term borrowings, as to whether the volume or the quantum of the short-term loan will remain the same going forward, or would you be converting some of that into long-term borrowings?
The quick answer is it depends on what rates are available at the time when we are looking to renew those short-term borrowings. It would be a decision taken at that time, but currently converting anything from short-term to long-term would be, I would suggest, foolhardy around the fact that the rates are probably coming to the top of their point, the peak of the market, within the next 12 months or so. And we should, and please don't quote me on this or make any form of investment based on this, we should start to see interest rates come down as the inflationary pressures on the council and the economy diminish, and might start seeing the Bank of England reducing the interest rates. So I would have a policy currently of wherever I can, I will pay off any short-term maturities with any cash reserves we have. Now, we have to keep a certain amount of cash balances to carry on the day-to-day running of the council. But if I can reduce that to the minimum I need, I can probably pay back, the council can pay back some of its short-term borrowings, giving us time to then pick back up the market when we get to the point where interest rates are more favourable. And certainly we do see a opportunity to either pick up some long-term debt that is at a reasonable rate and we can afford, then we'd look at that. So suddenly there may be some people offering instruments that are better than the Public Works Loans Board, and if they make the right opportunity, we would look at that. There are various organisations out there that will lend quite readily to local government. The Municipal Bonds Agency will do that and are potentially favourable compared to the Public Works Loans Board. So we always monitor at any point in time when a maturity comes through or is coming through, what we can do around a forward deal, what we can do around repayment, and whether we can convert to long-term debt. So that's the principles that we will try and follow where we can, get the best deal. But I don't want to lock in too much of our debt for a long period of time, based on the grounds that if we do achieve some capital receipts at some point from some of our property acquisitions, as plans come to fruition, we don't want to have no asset and debt that's back behind it going on longer. So we'd use the receipt to pay off some of that debt.
Thank you very much for that, Mr. Watson. Councillor Hawkins.
Thank you, Chairman. Just a very quick one. Can I ask Mr. Watson, through you, presumably that he will be, before any decisions taken on repayment or extending loans or what have you, hold further discussions with Arlene Close, who are our advisors on this matter, and they are the ones that are in the market, so to speak. Thank you.
Please do, Mr. Watson.
Thank you, Councillor Hawkins. As a point of correction, and please forgive me, we no longer deal with Arlene Close. We have engaged the services of Link Treasury Services Limited, who are the other people who provide advice to local government on it. We will always talk at times with those on our advisors, but it's very important to remember that they are advisors, and any decision taken around investments or repayment of loans or taking more debt is a council decision, and they will quite heavily do that. We also work not just with Link Treasury Services, we will talk to brokers, and the brokers are the ones that are doing a real good job for us right now around forward dealing, and we have some good relationships with them as well.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So, I didn't appreciate Arlene Close were no longer our... I'd missed that somewhere in the excitement of the summer or whenever. But thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hawkins. Councillor Hawkins. If there are no more questions, I shall move on to agenda item 8. Portfolio update, finance and customer services, Councillor Perry.
Thank you again. So the update on the finance and customer service portfolio. The activities of the portfolio cover the following activities: finance and accountancy, revenue and benefits, procurement, the customer contact centre, and a general improvement of customer service standards. Many of these activities are high volume, customer facing services that interact with the majority of the borough's residents in a variety of ways. These include collecting council tax and business rates, providing housing benefits, paying suppliers, collecting debts due to the council for rents and the provision of services, and administering discounts, exemptions, reliefs, hardship funds and other support to taxpayers and businesses. In addition to these transactional services, the portfolio also has a wider remit to ensure that all financial aspects of the borough's activity are conducted efficiently and that a strong budgetary framework exists. This includes the creation and maintenance of medium-term financial strategy, the annual budget, the production and publication of regular monitoring annual reports for senior officers and members. It also manages the efficient and professional procurement of goods and services to ensure good value of money for our taxpayers. We have actually tightened it up quite considerably this year. The portfolio also includes the borough's customer contact centre, which is the first point of contact for residents who have a query or complaint about all aspects of the borough's activities. In carrying out all these functions, we have due regard for the guidance and statutory regulation promotion of sound governance. The service has a fiduciary duty to all residents and businesses and has the responsibility to ensure the long-term sustainability of the council. I'd just like to mention that there's a report published this week, I think, hasn't it, that puts our collection services in the top quartile of local authorities in the whole of the country. So they're maintaining a very high standard and are extremely efficient. If you actually look at the numbers in the report, they high 90s are normal for them in terms of amount collected and service delivered. So we are delivering a very efficient service there. All the those sections I mentioned there, their activities are broken down in detail in the report, together with their current performance and activity against their objectives and budgets and what have you. So if you've got any queries on those, we'll be happy to try and answer them. Thank you.
Any questions? Councillor Rice.
Thank you, Chair. It's just regarding the valuation kind of process, how that works for domestic properties. And in my ward, I've got a number of new buildings, which are new residential units, and I've had residents contact me regarding that they've had the temporary valuation, which Surrey Heath does, and they had it for a very, very long time, much longer than the expected deadline, and then so they would have had it at a specific tax band level, and then when the official valuation comes in, it's a completely different, almost not just one step, but it's almost 2 steps away from the provisional valuation that they've received. And I'm just wondering, what's the process for the temporary valuation assessments, and how is that then based against what would then be the expected valuation coming from the valuation office? Essentially, for example, I've had residents that have had a temporary tax band D, and then once they've had a full one come through, they've had a tax band F, which is almost very completely out of the realm of what they were expecting. I was wondering what the process is.
Mr. Watson.
Thank you, Councillor Rise. Yes, the process that we follow, and is the correct process as per the IRRV, the Institute of Ratings and Revaluations, or what it is, it's always known as IRRV in our circle, is that we will use our office. Well, first of all, we have visiting officers who go out and identify properties that are coming onto the tax base, going round, and as properties come on and we're notified of them, we will provide a provisional valuation. That's done by our revenues team leader, who is experienced in it and follows the IRRV process and standards in there. At that point, we also notify the valuations office, the VOA, and they will come out and do the valuation. They are having a backlog, they recognise that. Part of it is a knock-on from COVID. They didn't do a great deal of visits at the time because they couldn't go out, lockdown, so they are playing catch-up, which is why we had that long period between the process of us giving a temporary valuation and they actually setting their final valuation. Why we get a discrepancy, I can't give a definitive answer. Our team assess things based on the knowledge that they have and knowledge of the valuations process. But until a proper valuations officer from the VOA actually goes out there and visits, it becomes, there's things there. Now, it might be we come on based off plans as opposed to off actually going around someone's house and counting the number of rooms and things like that. And sometimes the plans do change from the developer put forward to the people getting actually inspected by the VOA. Sometimes people will build extensions in that intervening period, which increases the the footprint of the building and obviously the valuation. I would find it strange that we go from a D to an F, but that sometimes does happen depending on there. And obviously the VA will take into account other areas, parts of the area, so they come in and see it. I mean, we have to follow what they give us. Individuals can appeal to the VOA around it. And if we do find that people are having hardship paying because they've got a backlog, please advise them to contact our revenues team as soon as they can so we can manage any form of arrears and try and help them with the stage payment process. Rather than saying, you owe us all this back pay, we're going to send court action or something like that. So please get them to contact the revenues team.
Thank you, Mr. Watson. Councillor Rice.
Thank you. Just on the appealing, because it was my understanding that the only way for an appeal of a valuation was for essentially for all the properties. That was what I've been told. So for an appeal to take place, it requires a full valuation, a full reassessment of all the properties in a road, for example, or in the tax band area. Is that correct, or could number 17 have a complete reassessment done on just number 17, for example?
It would be, as you say, if they're like properties, they would have to revalue the whole area because you can't have someone in identical property that has their... What you do get is, as I say, people, if they do improvements to their property, extend the size of the property, don't need to pay any more whilst they're living in it. As soon as they sell it, the new person will get revalued around that. So you can get discrepancies in some streets because of that down the line. But if it's all new builds, they will value them as a block generally. So you won't get individual appeals, unfortunately.
Thank you, Mr. Watson. Any more questions on this part of the agenda? I see none. Excellent news. Right, moving on. Public realm and task and finish group update. This report, I as a chair and the member of the task and finish group, we got the three members here, Councillor White, Councillor Galliford and I. We haven't actually had the final meeting on the task and finish group as we speak, as we sit today. So I did ask the monitoring of, or not the monitoring of the Section 151 officer to send it out to actually show that we have progress. We have not sort of got stuck in the system, so to speak. So what I am intending to do is not to go through the report today, but once the task and finish group has met and concluded, and then we'll come back to the committee again. In the meantime, since the report is out there already, I would highly recommend that you all write in to me and to the vice chair. We will actually take those on board when we have the final task and finish group meeting before we bring it back to the committee. Yeah. Sorry, Councillor Wheeler.
Thank you, Chair. I just wondered where one can see the minutes from that particular task and finish group, because it doesn't seem to be anywhere online for us to view it. And I wondered how many times you'd met.
We will not very many times. That's the other point. So we have to finish this thing because we haven't. This is the first time we have seen the report. So we are going to finalize this once this report has come back to us. Please.
Thank you. I'm sorry to labour a point, and I think both you and I, as the members of that particular working group, were sent a number of questions from Councillor Bates that related to it, who brought up both constitutional matters and obviously matters in relation to that report. So what input, can I ask, have you had as a working group into that report?
Like I said, today was a day, like all of us, you had a copy of it. I had a copy of it from Councillor Bates. So I will be taking that to our final, when we meet next time, to discuss that those points as much as the report itself, so we can incorporate everything. That's what I've asked this committee, the members of this committee, to write to me. In fact, any councillor could write to me and give their views on it, or to copy that to the vice chair, and we will actually take that on board.
I think in order to be able to contribute to that, it would be good to have the minutes of the working group. All other working group minutes are available to councillors, and I can't see any minutes from that working group at all.
That's exactly what I said earlier. Maybe you missed it. We haven't met at all. No. Just to repeat, we have not met at all. So this is the first time we will be meeting because the report has come for the first time. In fact, the first report that came out was from the accountant. Yes, that didn't come to the task and finish group at all. It was presented. The second report that came to this committee was presented by the monitoring officer. Task and finish group didn't meet at all. This time, I only asked Section 151 officer to distribute it to demonstrate that we have progressed a lot further and a little bit more rounded way somewhere. So this is released to show the committee that we have progressed, but the task, I repeat, task and finish group has not met. So there are no minutes to show to the rest of the committee or to the rest of the councillors. I hope I'm very clear.
I'm sorry, Chair, I have to be honest to say that no, it's not particularly clear, because I don't see how the officer's report could have been shaped and come forward without the task and finish group meeting and giving them the direction as to what it is that they should be reporting back on constitutionally from a working group point of view. But if I've missed something, I will go back and reread the Constitution.
I'm sorry, I'm not talking about constitution. I'm actually stating the facts as I say it, because we have not met. Hence, I'm actually released it so that the members can see progress way beyond the previous other reports, so that we, the task and finish group, now will meet and look at this report along with any comments you, the members, want to put out there. And as for the minutes, I repeat again, there are no minutes because the task and finish group has not met. I'm not going to labor this point again to you, Councillor Wheeler. Thank you. Right. Now, I think we are going to go into a closed session, aren't we? Work program. Work program, any items to add on item 10? Councillor Rice.
Thank you, Chair. Just regarding the January meeting, it notes that we have the update from the Environment and Health portfolio holder, as well as the Air Quality Annual Review, and I'm just wondering if the January meeting would be a good meeting to have the update from the Climate Change Officer, as we did earlier this year. However, I would just note that as some of you may or may not know, the previous Climate Change Officer left, so we're getting a new Climate Change Officer, and I believe that they are beginning at the end of January. So I would probably suggest that's not the best time, or the best time to throw them straight into a meeting after they've just started. So if possible, could we include it in the March 2023 meeting, an update on the climate change working group?
Okay, we'll definitely consider that. Thank you very much. The reason we have to be careful is because these meetings today is one of the shortest meetings we've had so far. It's 8:24.
I completely understand, and in just arguing in favour of my point, I would say that it's, as we're all aware, the climate change strategy is a very key policy for the council, and as it says here, there is plenty of time within the March meeting. Now, there's 2 portfolio updates, but if we were to include that now, that would inform any further work that was to be included into that March meeting as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Wheeler.
Could I just put in a request, please, that the portfolio holders are double requested to come to those meetings. Thank you, Councillor Perry, for being here this evening, but it's slightly disappointing that both one of the matters that we'll be being dealt with in part 2, the portfolio holder isn't here and other portfolio holders are also missing. I think rum show would be roughly the way to translate it.
Councillor Wheeler, I couldn't agree with you more. I made a special effort, not request, and then we made the Democratic Services definitely put out a request to all the portfolio holders to attend this meeting. 2 of them did send their apologies in. So I can push them. I pushed them, and I believe the last year only they have turned up because I've been insisting the portfolio holders turn up. And I thank Councillor Perry for taking his time to attend this very crucial meeting. Thank you very much, Councillor Perry. We shouldn't be thanking, but we do thank people. Others have started coming, now they're slipping again. So I'm going to speak to the leader particularly to make sure the portfolio holders should turn up for this meeting because they do get paid an additional amount to be a portfolio holder on top of everything else. It's a responsibility to come and answer, not the officers. Officers are there to assist them. I've said this many a time. Thank you very much. Thanks for that, Councillor Wheeler. Really appreciate that. I got one thing which I want to ask the Democratic Services and the CEO. I mean, next year is election year, so I can see we're jumping from March to July. As I've already stated, there are so many things that come up on a PNF meeting. I don't know how. I've suggested a date to the Democratic, Catherine, to Ms. Simpson here, to actually see whether we can squeeze a meeting soon after the election. If we can, it's not practically possible, I accept that. Soon after, end of June or something like that. Otherwise, we are not going to make time. We will struggle.
Thank you, Chair. So I guess it always starts with the work programme, the items that you want to consider. As a standard report, you're looking at the feedback from each portfolio holder during the course of the year. I would suggest that the number of meetings that you have already, together with the role of the other scrutiny committee, the Partnership Scrutiny Committee, is probably about right. But if you reach a point where you have additional business or you feel that you're not able to accommodate it within the meetings, then we can always look at additional meetings. I'm just very aware that as well as Democratic Services team supporting all the formal meetings, we also have the cross-party working groups that are really importantly mentioned one earlier today, and each of those has to be resourced as well. But it's members, it's up to you to make a decision at the time around the level of work that you're wanting to consider, a number of meetings that you need to consider it.
Councillor Wheeler.
Thank you. Although I can see the reasoning behind additional meetings, and I think we've already gone up one anyway during this particular term, I have to say, if you think about elections in May and the training programme that is required for new councillors, the probability of being able to squeeze in an additional meeting for this, given the amount of preparation that is required, would be negligible. And to some extent, I feel that decision may be better served being made by those members that are elected in May.
I agree. I did mention that to the Democratic Services in the chairman's briefing, but I thought it's best that I mention it today so that everyone's aware that whoever the chair is next year will have a task of trying to keep to the agenda. Okay, thank you very much, everyone. We now formally close our meeting.
You have to move the resolution.
Part B. So, you know the part B. Go for it.
Is the resolution written in the...
Yeah, it's on the agenda.
What page?
Page 2.
Oh, right at
The bottom. So it starts there and then goes on to the next page.
There you go.
Members, pursuant to Regulation 4 of the Local Authorities Executive Arrangements, Access to Information, Regulation 2012, members of the press and public be excluded from the meeting for the consideration of item 12, which involves the likely disclosure of exempt information under the following category of Schedule 12A of the Local Government Act 1972. Information relating to financial or business affairs of any particular person, including the authority. And I think you just have to ask for... Yeah, I'll ask, yeah.
I need a proposer and a seconder. Councillor Rice and Councillor Galford. Proposal.
Are all those in favour?
All.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's fine. No, okay, thank you.